Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for the Words Margins Bookselling Workshop, Mentorship for Collective Abundance. My name is Michelle Malonzo, and I'm your host for this afternoon's event. The Word is a nonprofit organization whose mission is storytelling for collective abundance. We center authentic storytelling for BIPOC, LGBTQIA2S+, neurodiverse, and disabled communities. Support and connect writers, publishers, booksellers, and readers. Explore and build collective models for the literary ecosystem and hold safe space in community. To learn more about the work we do, you can check us out at thewordfordiversity.org. Our Margins Bookselling programming is a celebration of bookstores owned and managed by the communities we serve and booksellers who identify from those communities as well. This year, Margins Bookselling Month will take place in August, so follow us on our socials and sign up for our newsletter to find out more about all the opportunities and happenings that will take place this summer. Let me introduce today's panelists. Jhoanna Belfer is the founder and owner of Bel Canto Books, an independent bookstore with 3 locations in Long Beach, California. A Filipina-American poet and former hospitality executive, Belfer began hosting pop-up book events in 2018 as a way of connecting her business experience with her lifelong love of reading. She currently serves on the board of directors of the California Independent Booksellers Alliance and is a founding member of the Burning Issues Book Club and the Indie Bookstore Field Trips group. Calvin Crosby, the majority shareholder and co-owner of Salt Lake City's The King's English Bookshop and executive director of Brain Food Books, a 501c3 that puts new books into the hands of those without regular access, has been building community in bookselling for almost 30 years. He is a BINC board member, a 2022 Duende Word BIPOC Leadership Award recipient, and a juror for this year's National Book Award Fiction category. Calvin's commitment to building equity around books and reading in communities without libraries, bookstores, or consistent access has been a lifelong mission. As a member of the Cherokee Nation, he believes in land back one independent bookstore at a time. I also think there should be a t-shirt with that on it. Just a side note, Calvin. Alyson Jones Turner is a native Detroiter who resides in the city. She holds an undergraduate degree from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and a graduate degree in education from University of Michigan. She has worked with her mother to grow Source Booksellers since its beginning in 1989. Today, she enjoys the many roles she holds at the bookstore, making the literacy arts visible. Source Booksellers is a unique niche of nonfiction books and interesting sidelines in Midtown Detroit. She is the founder and director of Searching for Telos, a philosophy for children program in Michigan. She is an avid sports fan, outdoor enthusiast, and enjoys hobbies of numismatics and kite flying. Thank you all. Let me bring you all on the virtual stage. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to have you all. And before we sort of begin this discussion and I hand over the virtual mic to Calvin, I just kind of would like to set the stage for this conversation and how it came about. Calvin and I were chatting and the topic of mentorship came up and the problems so many people have with the existing programs, especially people from our communities. Many of the current programs have you sign up and then you are assigned a mentor, but who is this person and how has it been decided that they are a good fit for you? From personal experience, I remember when I was paired with a 70-year-old white cis woman and told she was going to be my mentor. And while I respected this person, I was taken aback because previous conversation had already proven to me that I was going to have to translate myself to her in order for her to understand how I was approaching bookselling. And it was going to be a lot more work than the kind I thought I was already going to do. So what happens when we consider the person as a whole person and we value their background and experiences that will dictate their approach to bookselling, or really any industry, and honor those experiences and appreciate them and have more than just sympathy for them? And what happens when we remove a binary of mentor or mentee that then implies I have an abundance of something or a knowledge of a certain thing and you have a lack? And what does it mean if we approach mentorship as two or more people choosing each other and acknowledging that we both have expertise? So let's share those resources together. And now over to Calvin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. I want to start with each of your definitions of what mentorship is from your perspective. Jhoanna, I'll go with you since we've worked together the most. However, I've seen Alyson the most in real life.
So for me, I've come from a corporate background. I worked for somebody else for most of my life. And so for me, in terms of being in the books selling industry, mentorship has been super important because, a lot of this you can't learn until you're actually doing the job. And in many other fields, you can study to be an engineer or a scientist or a lawyer. But there's so many moving parts to being a bookstore owner, to being a bookseller, to working in the industry. And for me, it has been essential to make those connections with other bookstore owners, people in the industry, and find out from them, like, what are the things that I need to learn? How can I help them with things that they're, wanting help with? And it really hasn't been as much of a formal mentorship that I've been in since I've been a bookstore owner and bookseller, but more of an informal one that I've, reached out, or other people have reached out to me to say, hey, somebody said that you are a person to talk to about XYZ. Do you have a minute to chat about that? And I've found that for the most part, everyone in the community is so willing and open to sharing that that has been, the way that I have really advanced my knowledge of like real life situations. Obviously, like, you can take classes for accounting or finance or working the point of sale system, but like those challenges that come about that are so specific to what's happening in our stores and what we're doing behind the scenes, I've really relied on other booksellers.
And Alyson, I think I might be able to guess part of your answer.
Well, I think my idea of my experience of mentorship, and at least at our bookstore, is we started buy a book, sell a book. We didn't start with the whole idea. So things like handbooks or like those tools that you need to be more organized, to be a bigger and better bookstore. If there are booksellers or big book people in the community that have some of those resources that we can sort of lean on, maybe not to tell us exactly how to do something, but to get us sort of in the area of preparation to make things like that possible. I get a lot of just mentorship through working with my mom, and and also the other bookstores, that we've encountered. We've been able to look up and look out for, many of the bookstores in our community, and I think that is that is a fantastic thing to be able to do.
From my own experience, I felt blessed to even be a bookseller. It was not on my radar from my little trailer park growing up. So I worked hard, and I do speak fluent white carriage trade, which I didn't know was a skill set. So I think for me, a lot of this, the absorption of information and guidance was a lot easier than for those that don't come up from learning to speak that language. But for me, the big change came when during the pandemic, I came in as the expert at Underground Books in Sacramento, and I got to work with the amazing Mother Rose. And I am humbled by the perspectives and the insight she gave me on a daily basis. And it has upped so much of my perspective on everything, but especially my customer service and the customer service that I expect from my booksellers. And it's interesting, you come in thinking like, oh, I'm the authority, and you're like, nope, I'm not always the authority, and there's room for all of us to learn. And something to reinforce something Michelle said, you don't know always, and it doesn't need to be a greater than, lesser than situation. I think we just have to be open to and agree to share some sort of common language, which will be something we can dig into in a little bit. And I started the next question already by talking about my dear beloved Mother Rose. Is there a person in the book industry that helped change your perspective? And Janet, Alyson, I'm gonna say you can't use Janet.
Let me see. I think if I'm going to try to think of her name, but she works at the Wild Rumpus. We were having a casual conversation. We were giggling, talking. Maybe it was like on a bus tour. But she said, you should apply to be a reporting bookstore. And so that really sent our bookstore down quite a rabbit hole in a, future joy that we didn't even know.
I like the word future joy.
I love that.
And Jhoanna.
Oh gosh. I mean, I think again, like I've been so blessed to come across so many people who are just so open and willing to share, and that I've tapped, like, I'm having a crisis, or I don't know how to do this, especially in the beginning, because we opened right before the pandemic, and we started out as a pop-up and have just kind of slowly gotten a little bit bigger every time. Thank you. And so there's things that, pretty much on a daily or weekly basis, something comes up and I'm like, oh, I've never done that before. Who do I know, knows how to do that? So I definitely want to give some love to the Silver Unicorn out in Western Massachusetts, Paul Swiden. He was I did take the Paz and Associates bookselling boot camp back in 2017, and Paul was in my cohort. And he was much further along. Like when I sat in, I was like, holy crap, this guy really has all of his stuff ready. Like he had a spot already and had plans for, the bookstore design. And pretty much along the way, especially those early years, I could, call him or email him or text him and say, hey, this situation has come up. Like, have you dealt with this? Or what do you guys do? Which is not to say like I just did exactly what he told me to, but I always knew that there was somebody that I could reach out to, and that I didn't have to just figure things out on my own, and learn from other people's mistakes and successes.
Yeah, Mother Rose, love her. If there was a structured mentorship, unlike those that are now available, that you could build from scratch, what are some of the things that you would like to, like as a mama bird, what are the things you would keep under your wing to help members of our communities? I will start. I'm going to say that I do like mentoring. And what I find about mentoring that I like is that we don't all speak the same language. So I'm going to circle back to that. And even as a bookshop owner now, I don't speak the same language as, we'll use the anonymous 70-year-old woman that Michelle brought in. We don't speak the same language. I don't have the same relationship to banking that they might have. I don't have the same relationship to feeling confident walking into a lot of those areas. So one of the things I try to instill as I'm working with people is to live in their power and to admit what they don't know, so that we can we can get those tools and that confidence. I mean, one of the things that I really see is that with all these new bookshops that are opening that happen to be opened by queer and or people of color, they don't know what they don't know. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because what we do know often holds us back collectively. And I believe that we are the only, I'm on my soapbox for a minute, guys. I believe the best part about the independent bookselling community is that we are stronger together. And by being able to allow new perspectives in, we also can learn. I mean, definitely we do have to have the financial backup and POS training and all those things. But I would start with a common language and the things that other people coming into this with money or with means or even with experience don't know that they don't know. That was a lot.
I think I would like to build a group of bookstores and booksellers that could be a resource to other bookstores. I know there are a lot of, not a lot, but there are some bookstores, like you said, that are new. And some of the bookstores, even here in Michigan, that have 1 year or 2 years. There are so many things that they could know right away that could help them to prosper further. And they just have to know that they could look us up and see if we're their jam, and then call us or contact us. And it kind of be sort of that easy, that there's someone open and there's someone in need.
I love that idea, Alyson, of having an advisor group or whatever you want to call it, for people who are have an expertise or a passion for a particular thing. Because I think that that's part of what like Calvin, you said, like you don't know what you don't know going in, and then once you do know what you don't know, how do you find that person, unless you've already been working in the bookstore industry and know people, or you're just incredibly outgoing and don't feel weird about reaching out to random bookstores across the internet. And obviously so many of us are bookish and probably introverted, and that's not in our comfort zone to be able to just reach out to somebody. So having that group would be amazing. I think for me, it's going off of that, like trying to help people manage their fear and be okay with not knowing, and understanding that we're all learning all the time, constantly. I mean, obviously the pandemic has shown that to us. Nobody is comfortable. Nobody is really an expert. And holding space for experimentation and failure, and that we're just going to learn and take that experience into whatever the next thing is that we do, and hopefully it's a better experience and we can improve, but if not, like you tried it and that didn't work, and on to other things.
So I think, and this is an exercise in imagination. There are very many organizations in our stream, in our pool, in our pond, however you want to describe it, that are trying to create these mentorship programs. And I would say that to date, great effort. I will be very nice. Great effort. It's it's not working. So how can we lead this movement of this group of like-minded people who can agree to find that common language and play to each other's strengths? This is like the $10 million question. Play to each other's strengths and boost each other, and also be open to being available, and also the vulnerability of being able to ask. How do we create that group or that space? Is it like, do we petition ABA? Is it a regional thing? Is it a big thing? Like, do you have any notion of how we could gather resources?
I feel like for me, part of it is having the having the support, essentially like the institutional support of something, either whether it's BINC or ABA or some other, organization that wants to get involved, on the ground and build something from the ground up. I think part of what is difficult about finding great mentors and building a successful mentorship program is that, it's oftentimes the same people who have the time and the energy and the resources to be able to mentor. And so you're pulling from the same group of, privileged folks who have a team to support them, and they can say yes to taking on something different. Whereas there's amazing people out there who are doing fantastic things and who would be great resources, but they just don't have the time to add one more thing to their already busy schedule of trying to keep their own stores afloat. And so I think a major component is how do we support, can we find a way to tap particular, people, and especially to help address issues that are being faced by new bookstores, by folks from marginalized communities, and how do we support them by saying like, hey, you're going to get a stipend, or you're going to get some kind of backing that will enable you to say yes more happily, and acknowledge that this is time and effort and expertise that you are providing. So, how can we support that?
Well said.
The how, and that's really, really difficult. Like maybe, I know ABA has affinity groups, and so that may be a start. But I think to even make it more digital, I don't know. I mean, just on Discord, you could pop your face in there. I'm trying to see how it's more accessible, like for the kind of overwhelmed, maybe smaller store, up to I have a lot of backup, um,
Also, I think that it's finding the time the people that can make the time, which we can't always do. And I do think there should be some sort of stipend thing for stores starting out. I see all these things, the professional book selling courses, which are phenomenal. BINC is working with the underserved markets, and they're building what's going to be an incredible program. ABA with their affinity groups and all of these things. In California, Jhoanna, we started Mosaic that has now, I think, evaporated. So all these things have tried and or trying. I just wish there was a magic wand where I could bring all the pieces into the same room and just go, this is what it is. And part of my frustration is that these conversations can't be controlled. They do have to somehow find an organicness. In controlling them, you lose people. I think with the affinity groups, I often feel like I'm way aged out, even though like the reason I would be interested in no, the reason I would be interested in is to be of service and to be available. So it's that trying to find that space where there's my epiphany. It's finding the space where we can hear and be heard without the clutter amongst our community, as well as the outside community, the traditional bookselling community. Maybe that's it. Maybe we do have to be more present and open amongst ourselves. I did not plan to go into therapy here. So. But sometimes it happens.
and 100% it's needed,
Yeah. I think regional meetings, when you're meeting, with your regional and you see, I guess, my mother and I, we just kind of run up to you and say, hey, what's your store? And see if we could throw something over their way. I don't know.
there is untapped potential in our regionals, and clearly I have some insight into that. But you're dealing with people with similar geography, sometimes similar customer base, and I say that from here in Salt Lake City. But I find that in Mountains and Plains, as a bookseller, I have a lot more in common. And now there are a lot of native bookstore owners, a lot of native booksellers, and there are Cherokees. And 30 years in, I would love to be of service to the tribes, especially to the Cherokee tribes. It's it is what we do to strengthen all of us. But I agree that we need to tap our regional access much better. Jhoanna, did you have anything to add to that?
I think too, with the regionals, I think there definitely is, an untapped potential there. And can we do more? I mean, I think it's we go back and forth between what people want and what we have time to do, and what folks are actually like, what they want, what I would love to see versus like what I'm actually going to sign up for and do. Right. I mean, I think that's always like the two warring things, because so many of us are pulled in so many directions, and so many folks are operating with small teams. And but I think that, being able to have more programming, or just, having somebody at every regional meeting who's going to be like the welcome person, like just having one person tasked, and they're just going to go around and make sure that every person there has been welcomed. And, especially if they're new to the meeting, finding out like, how can we be of service? How can we connect you to whatever it is you need? And for whatever reason you signed up to come today. Because I still, I think a lot of us do. It's like, I walk into a room and I count, like, I look at the people and I see like, okay, who looks like me? Okay, there's like 3 of us. Great. Which is not to say I'm not happy to see everyone. But I feel like I feel an extra duty of care to reach out to those folks who, don't look like your typical bookseller. To say, hey, I've been around for a little bit now. Like, what can we do to help each other? How can we support one another?
I am just I keep coming on because Deidre Dumpson from Edelweiss Plus, also former bookseller, comrade in arms, and the person I text maybe every day, which is possibly too much for her. Has just joined us, and she has a really great question to ask, and I want to go ahead and bring her on screen to converse with all of you. That I think is a really great question that she wants to pose, but also feel a duty of care. I just want to sit with that you just said, Jhoanna, because I don't think that is really embedded behind what we do often because of capitalism, because we're seen as prophets, as workers and money makers for whatever at large. And I think at the root, like thinking about what is that duty of care that just sort of like gave me goosebumps. Thanks for that. I love it. And now, Deidre, welcome.
Hey y'all! Oh my gosh!
Hey.
I'm not nervous. It's fine. That's because y'all are amazing, and I'm like, don't sound stupid, Deidre. Even though that I know that's not possible.
Not possible.
So hey, this is great. This conversation is amazing, and just as y'all were talking, it just made me think so much of like my younger self who always felt like there was a way to convince non-brown folks to care about the future and the livelihood of us. And I'm thinking of that in a way of like when we're talking about the ABA and regionals, who like, I love the ABA, I love the regionals, but I think like stopping at affinity groups speaks very loudly. And in my experience, even at Edelweiss, the amount of new small novel model stores that have like absolutely no idea of like industry tools, resources, where they can find information about things. And it just makes me wonder, right? Like, how do we make almost everyone feel essentially what y'all are talking about right now, which is like, there's abundance right now, there's care we can give right now, there's community we can give right now. And I wonder, I guess the question is like, how can you speak to like how we can shift our idea of mentorship to better see and acknowledge that there is abundance right now and there is capacity and space to offer care to folks right now. And I wonder if we are too caught up in traditional ideas of what mentorship should look like. And I wonder if that is like a source of like the fear of taking the dive into like reaching out to someone and just seeing how they're doing. I know, loaded.
Do either of you want to go first, or do you want me to dip a toe?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that, like, the thing I don't understand in terms of I feel like there's a disconnect between, you know, like you said, Deidre, the resources that are out there, the tools, the technology, the, you know, just even like whatever small procedural things like Alyson talked about. How do you become, what is being a New York Times bestselling reporting store, and how do you become that? Like, there's so many little things that that I had, you know, like that I found out one by one piecemeal, and how do, you know, is like, I'm a big fan of checklists. They're super boring and basic, but like I would love a simple one-page thing or whatever double-sided thing that says, you're a new bookstore, these are 10 things that you need to make sure that you're doing or you're aware of, so that you know, you're getting you're getting your fair share of whatever resources or programs or systems are in place to help you manage what you're doing. And I don't think right now there is that one place, which I think like the ABA, I know they've been working on that, but I don't know, you know, where we are with it.
Yeah.
I agree, and even to the basic, and we fell into this too, so I'm going to own that. But when we are using the acronyms, a lot of the new booksellers don't understand the difference between MPIBA and Caliba or ABA. It all sounds the same, and I mean, it took me years. I think I can confess this to actually understand that ABA was here and the regionals were here, and there was multiple regionals. It wasn't until I think I got on the NCIBA board, or what was the NCIBA board, before I really understood the difference. I just kept showing up at things. So being able to even start with I don't want to say the basics, but with the agreed acronyms and what they mean and their place in the ecosystem. You know, we have all of these abbreviations and we assume that language, but it's a big assumption.
Sometimes I think that the regionals, maybe I'm thinking of Gleba, has more of a reach. You know, there are used booksellers in there. I mean, there are a lot of different people that would go there and maybe not attend an ABA event, or even be a member. I'm not sure, but definitely could use some insight, a friendship, you know, just from another bookstore. So you know that you're not in it together. You could jump on there virtual if you needed to, you know, like just, you know, create more of, I think, a bookstore community, family.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I think that makes me think very deeply of how I originally connected to Michelle, actually. We met at Winter Institute, and right before the pandemic in 2020, right? I don't think I'm making that up, but it was the if anyone was there, the big topic was American Dirt. And yeah. So it was a rough show in that there was a mixed, you know, experience and mixed feedback of folks that were like, oh no, but then there were several folks that were like, yes, we won't cancel an author. Like we don't see the issue with this book. And to have found Michelle during that show and to just have someone that is literally what you were saying before, Calvin, just to have a conversation where I felt heard and I felt seen. And I think the same for Michelle. Like it was like, okay, you see what I see, right? Like, okay, this is not making sense. We're just going to enjoy ourselves as best as possible. But I was so grateful to have someone there that just got it. I didn't have to give a bunch of background to, I didn't have to explain like why I was frustrated. It was just us sharing in that frustration, but then also us then blossoming and growing our friendship to think about like how we can be better to ourselves and thus inevitably be better to the industry, and not feel beholden to upkeeping certain traditions to, you know, climb up or to be seen as, you know, an industry professional, and know that there are other ways to like engage and find us, and find other ways and imagine new ways of bookselling, essentially, that don't require you to maybe chip away at your soul every day. So I just want to say, like, I appreciate everything that y'all are saying. And I do believe that just being open and making yourself open to hearing someone when you have the capacity to could dramatically shift and change their position and their future in this industry, because it did for me. So I just want to express gratitude and honor that you all are centering care in the work that you're doing. And I hope it inspires other folks to prioritize care for themselves and also others.
I had a thought that I was going to follow this up with, and then I got lost into just the importance of care.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to go on this tangent about, well, yeah, tangent. Bookselling and publishing is a very traditional industry. There's been a pandemic. People have died, people have suffered, people have changed. Our brains are rewired. I do think there's a place to acknowledge the traditions and the history, but there's an opportunity now to be open and receptive. And part of that falls into this membership, this mentorship of where we strengthen one another. And we build this way until we are heard. 30 years in, publishing is slow to hear. And a lot of the systems in place are not ready for this. And new voices of color, queer new voices, we have an opportunity to finally let Alyson and I are a little more senior in our experience, to actually have our voices heard in a room now in a way that we never had that space. So, but the caring is the best thing that I think is coming of this, at least from my perspective, is that if we walk into the room with care, with a willingness to hear, with a willingness to learn, a willingness to teach as equals, I think that's our mentorship program without being funded. However, if anybody out there wants to fund one, there's definitely a great place to spend money here.
Absolutely.
And I want to also reinforce the regionals again. It's affordable in most cases to go to your regional. And we are, if nothing else, we're cousins when we're in a region. Sometimes we're siblings, but definitely, even my pals from the Bay Area for all those years, they're still the people I talk to weekly, daily, still on the birthday cycle, the advice cycle. And I'm making new friends in mountains and plains. And I have to say that the perspectives, and here's another place where we divide, the coastal perspective versus the inland perspective. And Alyson mentioned it with Kleba. Mountains and plains definitely comes at it a little differently than my coastal experience. And I have attended shows on the East Coast and ran shows on the West Coast. So there is something, I don't know, there's something there where the care and the respect, if we lead with that.
So I'm just going to jump on because I'm thinking about what you guys are all saying. And I think, one of the things that I think we need to also consider with mentorship is having care and patience with ourselves and the ability to acknowledge what we do not know and that is okay. And I think there is an approach of, you have to have certain tiers of success in order to be considered or thought of as a mentor on something. But what is that success? How is that measured? And how you are measuring it, why must that be the standard for someone else? So how can we listen to someone asking a question and they want to approach it from a different way, or their measure of success is different from ours, and we step back and say, okay, well, maybe I need to find someone, or how can I connect you to someone, because this is what works with my community, but let's find someone who can help you accomplish that, or help you with tools, provide you with different tools than I have. And I think there's a thing that we do where it's like one size fits all. And like, it doesn't, and that's okay. Like, I don't understand why that's like not okay. Like I if like a store wants to be a pop-up in perpetuity and never wants a bricks and mortar, why is that not okay? Why is the end goal always, well, when are you getting your bricks and mortar?
And I think we've seen, like, I've been really following different bookstores' journeys as they go from, maybe starting out as a pop-up or vice versa, starting out as a brick and mortar store. And then as, the years have gone on, shifting to a more mobile, a model, or something where you can be in multiple places in your community, because maybe it's not serving you to have one physical location that has super high rent and that you're constantly stressed about paying, the bills, and switching to something that's a little bit more agile. I think that I feel like I'm seeing, here in California and across the board, that the folks are having to try different things. And certainly for folks like us, it's usually not realistic to say, oh, I'm going to go and, find $100,000 to open a physical store somewhere. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so how do we make space for those other models, and how do we help places like the ABA and our regionals and other, supporting institutions to see those models as equally valid, equally important, and equally worthy of learning something from.
I think I can speak from having a niche store. And so our store is primarily nonfiction. And a lot of times when we talk to other booksellers or other peoples that may be, trying to give us insight and advice, they think maybe that's our error, that we need to be general. And, you know, it's the same way I think when you think about pop-up, maybe you are a, a, a bus and your bus is your model and that's what you're going to do. There should be insight in cheering that on as well.
So Michelle, you led with this about the binary, and I think that for those of us of a certain generation, putting this into context now is the binary is the traditional bookstore model. It is the bricks and mortar. It is when you grow up, this is the thing you have to do. So I'm going to use my first F-bomb and say fuck the binary when it comes to our models. And even with the novel model, I feel like when we say that, we're all feeding this. When I talk about white carriage trade, I'm feeding it. Like let's just find that place to respect the work and stop letting the words control us. And I think that is part of the problem, and why even for mentorship, because these words control us, and it is a system of greater than and lesser than. And if we can just say, and I would like to say this for the world, I would like to say this for the United States, I would like to say this for the state of Utah, but I don't have the influence in any of those places. But here in this space, I again wanted to say, can we just look at each other as equals that may have a piece of the puzzle that fits the piece of the puzzle you're looking for, and start the conversations that way and see what happens.
I know I'm not technically a panelist, but
you are now.
Just thinking of like books that have like shifted my mindset on exactly what you're talking about, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which maybe folks here are familiar with. Right. It's like we've all been indoctrinated. We've all been raised, well, American folks specifically, Westernized folks, have been indoctrinated into this culture of fear, of reprimand, of this banking model where we're always looking for someone to pour information into us and treating ourselves as empty vessels that have nothing to offer. And when you get to the heart of that and see yourself as someone that always has something to offer, always has knowledge to share, and always recognizes other people as folks that have something to share, that have knowledge to offer, and we can all create new knowledge together, you realize that it really is, it's beyond our industry. This is our culture we are shifting. We've all been taught that this is the way that we should learn. This is the way that we should receive information. We should always be looking for specific benchmarks of success and be trying to mimic or emulate essentially white domination, white supremacy, and capitalism in our business practices, because that's the only way that we can survive. And there are real life like reprimands to trying to shift away from that. But also, like, speaking of collective abundance, right? There's abundance on the other side as well. And there are new, streams of income. There are other possibilities of communicating, community building, that don't necessarily emulate these dominant structures that we've all been told are the right way to be a human in society. And so, like, I really just want to like acknowledge that and say, read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, please. And also, I want to acknowledge too, right, like the speaking to fear, this fear that we don't have enough, or we don't have enough time, that we're exhausted. It is very real. But Trisha Hersey, our Nat Bishop in Rest is Resistance, I think perfectly spoke to like the dire need to rest. We need to rest now. We need to take care of ourselves now. And we need to take care of ourselves and take care of each other so that we can all rest, right? And like sometimes what I love about most of these newer models is that they are all about shifting the way that we give all of ourselves to our business, to our work, to our labor, and instead saying that there is a way that we can have these stores and still be ourselves outside of that, and still be a part of our communities outside of that. And so all of this is just speaking to my heart and making me think of those books. So I wanted to mention them here.
I feel like I was just in church and that now
I know. I was like,
because I think that, and you've mentioned it, Deirdre. I know you've talked about it, Calvin, like the language. And it's this language and this mindset that is collective abundance of we are, and it's hard because especially for our communities, we do approach things from a scarcity mindset because we've been excluded from every aspect. But to see ourselves as abundant and then we see others as abundant, I think, and also I, respect ABA. I respect the regionals. I've gotten a lot from both. I've been a board member in both areas. I've been an active participant in that circle of the industry. But I also think, how much time do we need to spend making others understand where we're coming from? What if we build it just ourselves? And I think that is one of the reasons I brought Deirdre on the screen is she texted me. She's like, how do we start from, like, is there a way we can start already from abundance? And I was like, oh, I know you've already been in meetings today. I need your face on screen. How do you feel? And I've been still thinking about that. And we've been talking about this in multiple ways, but I think something you said, Jhoanna, I think all of you have said something that now it feels like, it's all coming together. And when I think about the work that the Word does is we just say, you're going to do your thing. Cool. Mm-hmm. We're just going to do our thing. We're just going to try it in this other way because we are abundant. And I think what we have been taught to forget is the bounty of ancestral knowledge we carry within ourselves, of other ways of thinking, of other systems, of other ways of living life that were taken from our ancestors, but that we carry in us and we can bring to life in different ways in this different kind of world than they sort of lived in. But that carries so many similarities that we can bring that about and say, how are we going to do this thing? Let's corral together. So, we have 5 minutes left. But I also want to say right now, what is the mentorship that we want to build? What is that? And like, what are the steps, like, to making it? I don't expect anyone to answer that. I feel like here have a seed of like something that we will just say we will build it.
I think we should start with the open cohort of stores and people who are willing to be open to questions, to cheer on, to help out, and then someone else can find out how to what's the connector, right? I don't totally know that. It could be virtual, it could be not virtual, both.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like what you're saying, Michelle, about, I feel like some part of it is like, I certainly always feel like I'm waiting for somebody else to give me permission to do something, to say, yes, that's a valid thing to do. And I know with some of our bigger institutions, like, you have to have buy-in, you have to have, it's a process. And certainly part of why I became a bookseller and became, left my old job is I was tired of waiting. And I just wanted to at least, do things on my own. And if it didn't work out, then it didn't work out. But at least I was doing things. So I feel very cheered on by the idea of, like, we're just going to do it ourselves. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be, the best idea the first time around, but to at least try something and, put out a call to see if folks want to join an open cohort. Do folks want to meet, digitally, in person? What are some small things that we can start now to get this moving in the right direction?
I've worked publicly to do some of this, and I've worked privately to do some of this, and I'm still 100% committed and in however it works, because it strengthens me to help strengthen others. And ancestral, it's from my grandmother, who there's enough for everyone. We just have to share it to make it work. And I'm always happy to share my mistakes, because that's where I learn the most.
And but I think that's important to say, though, because we built such a culture of, like, having to feel ashamed of our mistakes
and hiding them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To quote Beyonce from one of the I'm not afraid to fail. And I think we really need to, like, embrace that, though. And also, it's not a failure. It's okay. And I think, yeah, that just struck me, Calvin. I think that's really, important.
Well, I think it comes from being othered always. Like, I'm never the darkest person. I'm never the whitest person. I'm never the straightest person. I'm never the gayest person. So I think it's easier for me to hold and learn from my missteps or side roads. That's why I didn't put judgment on them, but things that did not succeed the way I wanted them to, in a way that I think is my superpower, where it's supposed to be meant to be oppression.
And I think something for me that's shown up a lot is that I think as humans, like, we've gotten so accustomed to letting fear guide us. And just like you were saying, Jhoanna, Michelle, like, we are in this culture of, like, you don't want to own your mistakes, because mistakes are read as failure. Mistakes are read as you are less than. Mistakes could lead to you being demoted. Mistakes could, right? And it's like all of these ifs and these fears of what will happen. But I think there is power in owning that. There is, like, real, like, you feel it in your core. And, like, I think for me, like, when I was in college, when, like, acknowledging someone's pronouns were completely new to me, I would say out loud, I messed up. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. And yeah, that was scary, but I think it was more powerful for other people to see someone said out loud they made a mistake. And people are then more willing to say, I'm sorry for when they cause harm. And so just owning and like being open to, you don't know, like you said before, you don't have all the answers. I think role modeling that is so powerful, because people have been, are a lot of people let fear lead the way and let fear hold them back from being their true selves. And so it's beautiful when you can see someone kind of be all of the parts, the beautiful, the messy, and acknowledging that the messy is beautiful too, because it's a part of our humanness and who we are, and reminds us that like, you can pinch yourself, you're real, you're here, and we're not all like each other. Oh my God. But there are so many ways that we are connected to each other, because we are human. So this was beautiful. I'm trying not to cry.
I feel like we need to pass the plate, because
No, I love this. I love this.
love it.
Oh my God. So I know we've ran out of time, but I feel like this conversation could go on, and it's possible we clearly need to have maybe a mentorship event
Yeah.
2.0
At every trade show.
Oh, interesting. There's so much here. Before I close out this event, I also want to reiterate, whatever program, Calvin is right. Everyone should be paid for their work. Just want to put that out there. Every mentor who signs up, this is work, and this is labor, even if it is with care, like that deserves to be compensated. Thank you all so much. Thank you for taking times out of your afternoons. I was a bookseller. I know like how valuable your time is, and so truly we appreciate you spending it with us. I want to thank everyone who joined and was watching, and everyone who will watch, because this is taped and we will be sending this out to everyone. And if you enjoyed our programming, please consider donating at thewordfordiversity.org/donate. We value all of you. We appreciate all of you. We are grateful and honored that you spent your time with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.